Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Find a Competitive Advantage by Reshaping the Product, the Company, and the Market. We've got a fantastic lineup of speakers here, but we're just going to take a minute to allow as many attendees as possible in the next sort of 45 seconds, and then we're going to jump into it. So you're in the right place. We thank you for registering and taking some time to listen to us and have a chat about what is going to be a very interesting topic, very relevant to the way the industry is changing as well. Hello, everyone, and again, a warm welcome for joining us today. My name's Matt Atkinson, and I am a commercial director here at Reuters Events Pharma. Today's webinar is how pharma can find a competitive advantage by reshaping the product, the company, and the market. And I wanted to extend a special thank you to Cognizant, who have been our partner in putting together today's webinar. So just a little bit of quick housekeeping before we jump into things. Today is an interactive webinar. We're going to have polls. You can ask questions. So I ask you to take part as much as possible. You'll see a chat box at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to chat amongst yourself, chat with me, chat with the speakers. But the more we add into that, the better the webinar is my opinion. Again, we're going to have some polls throughout. So please vote. These give us a good indication of where the industry is and help us with the conversation too. And finally, this is recorded and we will be sending out the recording to yourselves and anyone else who is registered early next week. So do keep an eye out for that as well. But why are we here? Right now, pharma companies have an opportunity to gain significant competitive advantage through a variety of new product types and programs. It's an opportunity that is simple to identify, but difficult to capitalize on. The difficulty comes in working across so many competitive dimensions at the same time, optimizing current revenues today while building the next generation of products and the business models of tomorrow. How do you reshape the product, the company, and the market separately but simultaneously? How do you manage the drastically different timelines required to accomplish each of these three things without losing track of the big picture? That's no easy task. So we've assembled a fantastic group of panelists to guide you all through this journey. And now let's meet them. And Jane, I'll come to you first.
Sure, thank you, Matt. My name is Jane Urban. I lead the data, digital, and technology function for our global commercial and global medical teams here at Takeda Pharmaceuticals. I've been working in this space for a number of years, and I think the main interesting part of what Takeda is doing right now is this idea of embedding data, digital, and technology functions into each business unit and business function to really kind of dismantle the notion of an isolated ivory tower IT department and try to see if we can use the sort of power of folks who are that hybrid of being technical but also business oriented to really drive change and digital transformation across the company. So we're busy doing that. I've been working at Takeda for almost 7 years now, but before that in consulting and data and analytics type spaces. I'm very excited to be able to talk about this today and to work with the panel on it.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jane. And Zen, next.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. My name is Zen. I'm currently the CEO of Oncology Biotech. Actually, just a year ago, I was serving as the franchise head for Merck Group, the German Merck Oncology Business Units. And even before that, I was the Chief Medical Officer for EMD Serono. So really on the user and the decision makers lens, when we look into this very exciting area of emerging new technology and product lines we have to launch, and the product we have, takes through the regulatory pathways, is very exciting to see how can we leverage in the technology to create competitive advantage, which is near dear to my heart. I'm really glad to be part of this panel.
Thank you. David.
Hey, Matt. Hey, team. Happy to be here, and thanks for having me. David Karen, Global Head of Digital for Roche. Really excited to be part of the panel today. At Roche, as you know, we have a ultimate vision of really, 3 to 5 times more medical innovations at half the cost of society by 2030. So I look forward to going into the more details in regards to how we're tracking in that on that today, but also what we plan on doing in order to get there faster. So happy to be here.
Thanks. And last but not least, Vyom.
Yeah, hi, Matt. Hello, everybody. Vyom Buddha, I head up Cognizant's commercial life sciences practice globally. I've had the pleasure of launching several brands in oncology, cardiovascular, and other disease areas, both as a consultant and previously within a pharma company, and serve the needs of patients, both as within the industry is amazing, and to be with the panelists that you see here and everybody who has joined, it's just an amazing opportunity and a privilege to be able to have a discussion that's important for the industry. So thank you.
Brilliant, thanks. And we're going to stay with Vyom, who's going to give us a short presentation as we look a little bit more about learning and finding out how to get a competitive advantage in today's world. Vyom.
All right, so Matt, just tell me how I can take control.
You can share your screen at the bottom.
Okay. All right, hopefully people can see the screen.
Yep, good to go.
Okay, so starting off at a macro level, at the hearts and minds of on every CEO's agenda for life science companies are really three things. One is how to drive trust and build trust within the healthcare landscape by bringing innovative, differentiated, life-extending or life-saving drugs to market. And then second is how to drive value within the market as you bring those drugs. So things related to pricing and the experience of care that the patients receive within the healthcare ecosystem across their journey. So really bringing value to patients, payers, and providers. And then the third thing is obviously internal performance around running a competitive business. So those three things are at the heart of every life science companies, and it's an agenda that trickles down through every organization. And what we're seeing is investments happening in essentially two areas. The life and blood of the company is really to invest in novel products and bring those to market, either through M&A. We see a lot of M&A activity to increase the product pipeline for pharma companies, and also investing in their own R&D programs. And then more on the commercial side, as well as on the clinical side, companies are investing in digital and creating these digital ecosystems and making digital a fabric and the DNA of the company. And really pushing companies in this direction are really, to be honest, the non-traditional new entrants. So, smaller biotech, we obviously saw BioNTech and Moderna from, during the pandemic, really changing the landscape and bringing mRNA technology to market at a rapid pace. But then hyperscalers and technology companies driving that, Amazon, Google, and the rest. And they're really impacting everything that you see on the right-hand side above. How to drive real-world patient outcomes. How do you change the experience of care? How do you drive precision medicine and bring precision medicine to the market, and really, participate in value-based care. So to do that, if you really think about, this is this is something that we're all familiar with. This has been the business model of life science companies for the longest time, which is, in discovery, how can you bring products faster to market with the least amount of cost and accelerate that. And then on the commercialization side, really launch products and capitalize on the value that these products provide to patients and the healthcare ecosystem, generate revenue and profits before the loss of exclusivity of and patent protection before generics come into play. additional medicines, investments in oncology, which continues to be a pretty significant area of unmet need and a growing market, similar to CNS and immunology and cardiovascular. And then if you look at on the commercial side, a lot of the investments have been around really changing the engagement model. So we've seen the deployment hybrid reps, so not just field force that are meeting physicians face-to-face, but also hybrid reps. And we've seen recently actually companies launch 100% digital field force and really employ omni-channel engagement strategies to bring products to market, and then obviously continue the engagement across the product lifecycle. Investment in patient services and real-world evidence programs. What we're also seeing, as you know, is the science is changing. The science of cell and gene therapy, mRNA technology, as well as digital therapeutics and software as a medical device, is providing ability for us to provide precision care to patients. There's investments on the commercial side in leveraging technology like artificial intelligence to drive better diagnosis of patients through data, patient identification, recruitment, treatment, and looking at treatment and care pathways. And then some of the early signs where we might be a little bit farther out, but certainly as programs that are making investments are in sort of the digital twins and looking at clinical medicine in looking at digital ways to actually conduct clinical trials and looking at digital biomarkers. And also investment in open data collaboration. So multiple pharmaceutical companies working with healthcare systems in sharing data to bring precision medicine to life. And then on the commercialization side, increasingly pharmaceutical companies and life science companies are looking at participating in collaborative care, where and enabling patient and the providers to get more connected in providing care to that particular patient across the journey. And then overall, investing in population health and behavioral health. And really the goal, the debate is when you invest in these novel products and digital ecosystems, is it enough to actually change the curve where you see a quick launch and with higher revenues, but also when it comes to loss of exclusivity because of the pill plus the services program that digital provides, can you extend the runway of revenue and profits rather than a steep decline in the current model? So to have that conversation, we've essentially framed this discussion into sort of three areas. One is shape the product. So what kind of innovations and go-to-market models and customer experiences can actually help optimize existing revenue streams? And then all the way to the right, you see shape the market, which is how can we co-create products through partnerships and collaborations to unlock new revenue streams? And as we sort of manage both, what does it mean to our internal organization to provide that agility in terms of process, aligned incentives within the organization, enable both of these, shape the product and shape the market. So with that, I'll hand it over back to you, Matt, and look forward to this discussion.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vyom. And actually, I'm going to come to our audience first. So coming up in front of you, you should see a poll. What's your primary purpose for investment right now? The options are optimizing current revenue streams, new revenue streams, competitors are doing it, no discernible strategy, and other. If it's not up there, add it into the chat box. And whilst we leave that open for our audience to vote, Zen, I wanted to come to you first and get some insight into what's your mindset or framework for thinking about competitive advantage.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. That was really nice to hear Vion take us through. I actually love the tell, the second dotted line curve. I think that's actually everyone's strive for. So maybe take one step back, talk about competitive advantage. I think there's no one better than Michael Porter out of Harvard Business School. They're talking about how to create competitive advantage from the old days, the only cost base only. Now we go into a product differentiation. I think that's something going to become more and more important, and particularly around this digital transformation. On the other side is the competitive advantage becomes a core of any company, pharmaceutical company in particular, because the long-term sustainable competitive advantages become corporate strategy. If you're looking from a CEO's lens, CMO's lens, chief commercial officer's lens, and this has become not only just a tool, it's actually become a core. Right? It's very important for any company to sustain this. And then once you take this lens on, thinking about competitive advantage, both from a near-term perspective, a long-term perspective, bringing into the pharmaceutical industry, then you look at what we do is we're creating value, capturing value in the healthcare space and providing treatment benefit to patients. And then there's three phases beyond, I like your chart. If you look at it, everything is shifting, which is exciting, creating opportunities. First thing first is from R&D productivity perspective, you're already seeing that the field is changing. The 70% of pipeline in biotech no longer in pharma. So that ratio has shifted. I think, talking about Roche, Takeda, I think everyone's doing quite a bit harness that innovation. Also, the disease area has shifted from large indication. Now, 2/3 of the new launches are smaller indication, less than blockbuster product. So blockbuster product and the smaller product both become important. So that creation of value phase is very important. And the two other phases now become more important is clearly product launch, particularly in the hybrid setting. And no longer you can do reach and frequency and deploy 100 sales reps. I see everyone's cutting back because there's no access. On the other side, how you create another interface so the physician can access to the information is become more and more important. Talking about oncology, which is near dear to my heart, during the pandemic, we paid attention. There's like NCCN guideline. There's between 80 to 100 new treatment updates. And how can the sales rep deliver that? So this is something become more and more really important. And last but least, I would want to draw your attention as well, is the biosimilar market. You see the Humira, the biggest drug ever, now is totally changed the transformation. That's why I like your tell, because the old days, small molecule, it crashes whole. But now with the biologics, that tell is very big. Yesterday, a friend of mine did an analysis, Mike Ria, when you look at the number, right now the blockbuster products, 350 billion are from the new launches. Actually, there are 200 billion that came from already beyond 10 years patent life. So this is not disappearing. And by the way, there are 40 billion come from things beyond 20 years. So really the digital approach can be really important for that tell. And I love when you put it on, actually that probably going to create a lot of competitive advantage. So I'll pause here, but Matt, I'm just thinking, set up this framework for the team, so.
Brilliant. Anybody got anything to add to that as well? No, it looks like we're good. So I'm going to end the poll and share those results, and you should see them come up on the screen in front of you. Optimizing current revenue streams being the biggest there. And then I think it probably speaks to the digital transformation that the industry's seen. New revenue streams at 40%, competitors are doing it at 5%, no discernible strategy at 7%, that's worrying, and 4% had other as well. Vion, your perspective on that one, did you see those as being the top two answers?
I think so. On the new revenue streams, I think as we get further into the discussion, the question becomes, these bets, are they actually going to fill that curve? Meaning, are these new bets on the digital side going to actually show growth to the current revenue that the companies enjoy with the blockbuster drugs. So that's essentially the debate. I was actually surprised with no strategy at 7%. I thought that was a little bit high, but I think it's not surprising the 45-40 split.
Mm.
Jane, what would you think? Like, and Davidek?
I agree that the fact that there's a number of people that don't know why they're doing it is, or like that everybody else is doing it. If you add those two together, like that's something to keep in mind. I appreciate the honesty, but I think, it does, there's definitely a need to kind of, we deal with this tension all the time, thinking between how much do we invest in things that we're about to launch versus how much do we invest in the current set of products. I think that's where the more interesting probably tensions lie. To try to figure out that balance point and that prioritization, because they both, of course, create value, and it's subtle, kind of the ROI between the two, depending on where each product is in its life cycle. Sorry, David, I think I interrupted you.
No, you said it right, and even number one coming in around just optimizing our current models, right? And I think Zen, you mentioned this before around doors are closing, but I think also the value that we're adding potentially to, let's say, those external customers, whether it be healthcare providers or patients, needs to continue to simplify, right? And I'm sure we'll go into more detail during this conversation around that. But if you look at the various portfolio makeups of even the top 15 pharma now, I mean, there's no other direction that we have to go into if we really want to really see better patient outcomes at scale. But then another one, it's interesting, and in VM, you mentioned this around this. What is that second revenue model, or third? What does that additional revenue model look like? I know a lot of companies are looking into that. I know, Jane, you and I talked about that last week as well. But maybe it's on the insights business or early. There's a lot of things there, but hopefully, as an industry, really focus on, again, not necessarily revenue models, but driving those patient outcomes. And if we do that right, that would definitely, harness different revenue models. So.
Brilliant. And so I'm going to stick with the polls again, and we're going to get another one going right away. Should see that coming up again. So do you believe you're able to quantify and justify your investments to management? We have defined and performed well against our metrics. We believe we're doing well, but it's not measured properly. We don't know how or what to measure, or it's not a priority, or we're not investing enough to justify measures. And whilst we keep that open, Jane, I wanted to come to you. Looking at your products or programs and optimizing revenue streams or creating new ones, what are your priorities and what progress has been made within your organization?
Yeah, it's clearly a common topic. And I think where we're going with this notion of trying to embed data and digital and technology into the teams and really bring that product mindset shift to life with our existing commercial organization and our existing medical organization. I think that's even maybe more exciting, perhaps comparatively, because I think it's commercial's always had a more leaning toward thinking about product. And of course, just naturally, the types of folks who are in those spaces are more Porter friendly, or no Michael Porter better, perhaps. But I think with the medical team where I support now, I see them trying to pivot and think about how to engage with clinicians in a more sort of product-oriented way, or a way of thinking about how the clinician might use or engage with us. And so that's, I would say, the biggest trend in a macro sense for us is this idea of being more customer-centric. And that sounds trite, but for pharma, it's actually a really big transformation, because we tend to go at these things, you have an R&D group that's talking to a clinician, you have a medical group that's talking to a clinician, you have a commercial group that's talking to a clinician, and maybe you have patient services or compassionate care or some of these other sort of satellite things as well. And each of them is almost by definition separate and almost intended to be sort of siloed from a regulatory perspective. And I think we're really questioning, how do we do this in a way that we still, of course, follow all of the guidelines around separating and incentives and all of those things, but it's not a great experience, right? I think when you think about your consumer experiences, when you work with a company, they know you and they have an identifier of some sort that kind of tells them you're you. And then every time you interact, there's a, oh, I saw yesterday you did this, or 2 weeks ago you did that, or are you calling about this flight, or are you calling about that order? Those are all things that involve customer centricity. And pharma really hasn't organized ourselves that way. And so I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do from this transformation, is say, how do we think about what our customer experience is? whether that's a patient or a clinician, and start to really like to start from them back to us as opposed to the other way around. So that's, I think, one of the biggest transitions we're trying to make.
Zen, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, Matt, actually, I really love what Jane said. And there are two things I would just want to build upon. I think one thing is inside out versus outside in view, right? I think pharma has a traditional lens because for a variety of good reasons and challenging reasons, we always look inside out. We say, well, this is what we used to do things. Our compliance and legal department set up certain ways. And they're very hard to redesign that thinking. When you look at outside in, it's like, doesn't make any sense, right? Even one company can use, 6 different, digital engagement tools or with the customer. I mean, then it doesn't make any sense. So that's a very important lens to your part in terms of just for the sake of doing it, but not really understand the customer. On the other side is, I was surprised to see the pool results from the previous one, is pharma, we actually are really good at copying each other. So I was just seeing that people, they say, well, they're picking up my competitors doing this already, because that would get everyone moved. If we were in the boardroom thinking about our top competitors doing something and we're not doing it, and you can see the temperature goes up very quickly. So actually, that's actually one of the good reasons to make your own organization invest in something. If you see there's best practice, almost de-risk and creating value for another organization when you're launching the product same time, I'll tell you, it will move. Your organization will move in a rapid speed.
No, you're so right. And I think the other thing is to look to other industries too, which we tend to not do very well. But if you think about our colleagues that are in finance or insurance or something where there's an element of common data types and common kind of need to follow regulatory guidelines, those are probably good places for inspiration as well outside of pharma, both from a talent perspective and also just from like what are those companies doing and how is that working? Because it's a similar kind of, they're separate organizations by design, right? They have a lot of common things and they've somehow cracked it, right? You can go to a bank website and see all the things that the bank can do for you. It's not separate and logins to each one. So that's kind of where we need to go as a pharma industry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think picking up on Zen's last point and Jane, yours on copying, pharma companies copying each other, that's the point, which is the new entrants are actually seeing that pharma companies are mostly copying each other. So they're bringing the innovation in their own way from a very different angle because they're not necessarily traditional manufacturers, except for the smaller biotechs. They're trying to bring that innovation. And then I think looking at other industries, it's a great example. We want to be digital and bring this back to the commercial lens. We've deployed omni-channel, and we've talked about this, hybrid, 100% digital launch and so forth. If you look at the metrics, so our tactics were changing, but the metrics maybe are not changed. So things like looking at retail, cost of customer acquisition, cost of customer retention, and when we say customer, it can be from an HCP lens, it can be also from a patient lens. We don't track those. I mean, most pharma companies are not necessarily tracking those. Some are beginning to think on how do we even get the data to actually measure it. And then if you look at across all the channels, how do you combine, and it's funny you said reach and frequency. I still hear reach and frequency, but are we measuring reach and frequency at a way, do we have a share of voice, share of impact to customers within the healthcare ecosystem? Because so many people are trying to care for that patient. Well, what is your pharma company? What is our share of that value that we're adding? How do you measure that? What is that metric? What data do you use? And so there's a lot of innovation still left in simple thing that people say is, oh, omni-channel, we've been doing it for 3 or 4 years. No, you've made technology investments and you're beginning to deploy tactically, but it's not really a fabric of how we commercialize products yet.
Yeah, and Matt, I know you want to go on to the survey, but just to double click on some of those points, there's a lot in there, right? And if you think about it, we mentioned looking outside in, inside out. The key, and I think where a lot of companies will succeed, is being better versions of themselves, right? It sounds a little quirky, but it's actually true if you really think about it. If we're truly a scientific, medicine discovery company, right? Let's put our efforts there. And then what we're not good at, you partner or you figure out how to do that differently. For example, right? You mentioned sometimes you look internal. The customers don't see we have medical departments, sales departments, all these different pieces, right? They see one company, Roche, right? Takeda, et cetera. But unfortunately, how we operate internally might be a little different. In regards to how we measure that, and this is interesting, and you are starting to see trending, and I'm seeing this even outside of Roche now. There are a lot of companies moving away from the traditional sales and MSL teams in the field. And I don't think it's just because doors are closing. It's very simply, I don't think we're bringing the right value to the healthcare provider or even the ecosystem. Because if you look at this, the healthcare ecosystems around the world, take the US, but then even outside the US in the various countries, I mean, it's very complex and there's a lot of stuff that needs to get fixed, and they're looking for partners. And that's why I think pharma can play a key role, is how do we actually understand their needs, right? Maybe it's more around data acquisition in a certain space, right? Can we get them access to that data to truly run some heavy level population health versus going in there talking about our product, right? And that was one of my hesitancies for this call today, was around this, it's not about us competing against each other. What's the advantage? If we do this right, we're actually going to be able to treat more patients, grow the pie, and really add more value to not only our stakeholders, but more importantly to the patients, what really matters, right? And unfortunately, we still see, and again, I'm gonna put the hat of omni-channel personalized customer engagement on now. A lot of companies are getting better at this. I won't say at scale across multiple disease areas and countries, but down to potentially molecules and countries, we are getting better. But we're going to hit that reflection point where almost next, you put your customer in the middle, a patient, a healthcare provider. They don't know where the hell to go, who the hell to talk to, right? So I do think that there is going to be a coming to Jesus moment where our industry really has to look inside and say, where do we add value? How can we become better versions of that? We're not going to be the next Uber, Amazons, et cetera. No, that's not what we strive to. We strive to get more medical innovations out. We strive to invest more money in research and development to really help move this needle along. So I'm not sure, Matt, how deep you want to go into how some companies are measuring that. But if you look at it, you can go early stage, leading indicators and lagging indicators. So Guillaume, to your point, there is sometimes from a leading indicator, you have to look at things like reach and frequency. Are we using, the technology that we're investing in to communicate effectively or listen to our customers, right? Within the middle of that, we talk about customer experience. Are we measuring that at scale across various countries and brands and speaking apples to apples, right? Are we moving that needle? And then the lagging indicators, that's what we typically look at, whether it's P&L or things such as that, or even launching more medicines, right? So, or keeping medicines, services available, even at the end of that tail, as you nicely showed early on. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to continue to optimize this model within pharma. And I think now we're at that reflection point. If you look at the various pipelines around the industry, there's no other choice for a lot of companies. We have to get better at really providing value.
Matt, can I make a quick comment on what David is saying? I mean, the thing, adult learning by case, business case. I mean, since you can't talk about Roche, I could, no, I'm joking, about your product. Sometimes the benefit comes from you have no existing experience or product in a certain disease area. Why I'm saying that, I'm giving some quick example. Exactly, you're saying, listen to the customer. One thing I think Roche did well with Ocrevus launch. CD20 antibody, and never in the MS space. And they really listen. I mean, you had to have infusion clinic for the neurologist. But, you design from outside in, listen to the customer, and then really build a product that fits into the ecosystem and provide value to patients because it's a long, durable benefit. And suddenly you capture a major share of market, actually creating the pie in the oral dominant, pure or injectables market. So vice versa. Another business case is, Keytruda launch, right? Under the Merck, they had very limited oncology market. But guess what? They listened and they worked with and introduced Q3 week dosing, which fits all the oncology practice. Little things matters if you listen to the customer, the bottom line is.
Yeah. And Zen, even to double click on that, that's a great example. Now, throwing the complexity of now we're in 60 plus disease areas, we're entering new spaces in rare disease. Like, how do you actually do that at scale to really maximize making sure patients have access? That's the intellectual challenge that we're all trying to figure out. And that's the beautiful part of it as well.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Brilliant. Coming up in front of you now, you should see the results from our poll just before. So we have defined and performed well against our metrics at 25%. 52% are saying we believe we're doing well, but it's not measured properly. 16% saying we don't know how or what, or it's not a priority. And 7% are not investing enough to justify those measures. And Davidic, I wanted to stay with you for just a bit, and maybe putting back on, say, the omni-channel or CX hat you had on before, and looking at scaling and ROI and metrics and all those bits and pieces. Just keen to understand sort of your approach thus far, and looking forward, what that model looks like for the Roche Digital team.
Yeah, thanks. And again, this so let me take a step back there. So what digital customer engagement, personalized engagement means for us is, how do we enable the business? How do we enable our people to do more with less? Again, I paint the picture of we're in 60 plus disease areas. We have some amazing molecules that are coming out that are here. We have a very robust portfolio. If you look at in general, we have, obviously we're in multiple affiliates around the world, and we have some great global teams, but where our team plays a role is almost like we're the glue and we're the enablers of how do we enable our global strategic scientists, medical marketing teams to be able to hand over to the affiliates this package where then they can actually make sure there's access in place. And then within that, they're able to communicate effectively when customers come to us. They can actually get the information they need in a timely manner. Now, I'm not saying this is ChatGPT on steroids, right? Where a consumer comes to one spot and has everything. I think that's utopia, and we're going to eventually get there. But I just want to be clear that this is not about digital. This is about enabling the organization to be better versions of itself and really helping us get more of these medicines to patients. And how we do that is through the various forms and focusing on specific areas, right? And this is something that's not new to the industry, but we're doubling down on understanding of how do we truly know our customers? How do we know our customers dynamically? So all the insights, data, and everything in and around that. But just to get there, as you know, think of all the interoperability that has to happen within the company, right, in order to have that. And I see Jay nodding their head, right? That's not an easy thing to happen, right? Which means it's more than just CRM and everything. It's having, not 4,000 websites, but having a universal way in which customers can reach us and get information. Having things like medical information accessible in various different destinations, right? Not just having a MedInfo page. So there's a lot of things that we're doing in order to enable us to be better versions of ourselves. And how we're measuring that very simply is coming back to the disease area strategy, right? So this is not a digital metric we're trying to figure out. It's ultimately, as a company, what is the strategy around that disease area, even that molecule? And then how do we seed in that way in which we look at content or modular ways of working for creating content? How do we make sure we understand the insights and data and analytics around the customers? How do we truly make a closed loop where not only are we launching these beautiful new molecules into the affiliates, but then we actually see how is that actually happening? And that's at scale, not in just one disease area, but across multiple countries. Again, this is something I feel we're all working towards. But when you really put on that closed loop omnichannel marketing piece, the ways that you see success is you're able to launch more products. You're able to keep more services available for current products on market. We see that tailspin. We're able to help our people do more with less. I mentioned before earlier, I think Roche did a really great thing recently around this, really simplifying our voice to our customers, to our ecosystems and healthcare providers, right? In the past, typical pharma models, you hire a whole bunch of people to get out there and just say, hey, differentiate, win, win, win. Now, I see a lot of companies actually going out to say, hey, how can we help, right? Knowing that the portfolio we have, let's put that to the side, but how can we be partners in the healthcare systems to move things forward, whether it's in the Nordics and the tendering, or whether it's in the US, or whether it's, rest of the world. There's different various models on how we do that. So I'm not sure if they answered your question, but I'm just really trying to paint the picture of, and I think that's where a lot of companies sometimes go wrong, is they really focus on the old school multi-channel tactics, right? Let's do an event. Let's do an email campaign. Let's do a messaging. Let's do some media spends, right? Versus really understanding how can we simplify? How do we make sure that are on websites are competing against each other and from an SEO perspective, and actually customers can get information, and then we're measuring that. And then the last piece I like to say is, and I haven't seen this yet in the industry, but we have seen this outside, where truly understanding the customer journey in the moments that matter. And by that, I mean patients and even healthcare providers, and be able to clearly articulate that and see that in a visual way, where then you can understand, are you influencing those moments that matter, right? And I use the example of Emirates all the time, where Emirates did this exercise multiple years ago, but they said, hey, there's two things that they want to focus on within a customer journey of someone actually going on a flight. It's that car service pickup and in-flight service. And they focus primarily on those 2 points, right? And then they make sure all the efforts that they did, they can measure, and they can actually know if they're actually trending in the right way or not. And you can see from a sales perspective, they blew up their sales numbers. I see a lot of companies now in pharma really trying to understand what is that patient healthcare journey, but more so the metrics and data around those points. And then how can they positively impact that, right? So again, hopefully everything I said is not about us beating the competitor across the river in a specific disease area. It's more of, we're not worried about them. It's how can we actually focus on being better versions of ourselves? How can we help our people in the field do more with less and have all the data around them? How can we help our global medical colleagues and teams really have all the information they need, even to Guillaume's slide, early stage, right? How do you make sure when we start looking at molecules, is this beneficial to society? Can we commercialize that, right? So those are the type of conversations that we're starting to have in this space.
Yeah, Vivek, I so much of what you said resonates with me. I think there's two things that I was going to sort of add to this. One is, I think when you think about the problems we need to solve and orienting things toward the problems our customers are having. And so I feel like I'm a broken record of like, what problem are we solving? What is the core root cause of whatever this pain point is for us or for our customer? And then also, like, I think what happens often with this, because digital technology seems kind of new and maybe a little bit different from how we used to operate, there's a bit of filtering I find with some of the marketing and sales teams. They try to decide what a data digital technology person could help them with. And so I think the other challenge is to really say, what is the core problem? Just full stop of whatever it is you're trying to do. And, maybe the answer is to hit a revenue target. Maybe it's something that doesn't strike immediately as a data digital technology, or I have these patients that I think are out there that I want to make sure we identify and get them, aware of the fact that they may have a rare disease or whatever the problem is. Let's make sure that we are thinking about it together as a kind of a cross-functional team, rather than here's the data problem I have, or here's the digital problem I have. And so to your point around the omni-channel kind of becoming maybe too much of a focus because it's something people kind of know what that is. So they just sort of throw that over the bar. So that's kind of in the once we're already in the market piece of the problems to solve. And then I think in that early stage that you were speaking to around how do we make that a more effective process as well for making the therapy come to life and be really useful for clinicians and patients. I thought there was a question somewhere around how do we kind of get patients out of the healthcare system altogether? Like, can they do more at home? Can they get their answers without having to go out in the world, especially if they're immune compromised, for example? And we learned that in a big way in the COVID, or the deepest part of COVID. But I think that's something we're working on as a company-wide effort to say, can we add a digital strategy to our target product profile? It's an alphabet soup of an acronym, but this target digital product profile concept is something we're really looking at in our pipeline to say, most of the products we're going to bring to market now, of course, they have to be super innovative and they have to really change the standard of care. Otherwise, they're not worth pursuing anymore. I love that, by the way. I think that's a wonderful transition that pharma has made. But can we put a digital spin on some of these things? Is there a component, a diagnostic, a tool that goes along on the journey with the patient that can make it a better experience beyond just the molecule itself and the administration of the molecule? And so I think that's another place where we can potentially change the value proposition, maybe accelerate that adoption, accelerate the usage, the compliance, all those things that we're trying to do when we take a product out into the market. And also, I think the digital twin, I know we touched on that a little bit beyond the same thing. There's some opportunities especially in rare disease, which Takeda has a fair number of rare products where we know it would accelerate our clinical development tremendously if we can use that as a way to get things done and to help patients, right? Because they're not having to be on a standard of care in a trial when there are opportunities for something that might be better for them. So it's a really nice, I think, set of complementary capabilities, but they're not data digital technology capabilities. They're problem solvers to enable the overall business success. So I think that's a big part of what the pivot needs to be. Before it was kind of an isolated concept, and now it's mainstream. It's part of the whole process.
Matt, you can drive the questioning, but it would be good. I wanted to give one or two examples of where, what kind of good looks like, at least from, and everybody has a definition of what good looks like, so it's completely biased. But I'd love to get there. I can go now, or you can
jump in there. Yeah, please.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about role of pharma and metrics and then digital. One of my earlier slides, we talked about sort of participatory care, where pharma can really be thinking about is, the best people who actually can care for the patient are, number one, patient themselves, caregivers, and the providers. So really, how can you be a partner in care? And I think AstraZeneca, talking about one of the cases, AstraZeneca actually partnered with Massachusetts General Hospital in, I think, 2021. And it was kind of interesting, right? Like they introduced a digital platform, a patient app, and a clinician dashboard for, people within the Massachusetts General Hospital to drive outcomes for patients that had asthma and heart failure patients. So it was, again, providing a digital capability to providers and to patients to better better participate in care. And what they actually showed, and this is the metrics, when we talk about outcomes and metrics around digital, it comes to real world outcomes for the patient. They were able to show the adherence rates actually doubled for the patients who were engaged, and the readmission rates were cut by 1/3 of the industry average. So these are real outcomes where you can actually say, digital and the value, the value that, the measurement that we provide, and, share of value provided, not share of voice, but share of value provided for a subset of patients. Now, think about if all pharma companies were executing programs at this level, the amount of value that life science companies can create. And this is just one small example, and a really good example where, really participating in the healthcare ecosystem in a meaningful way, bringing in digital data and creating real world patient outcomes. I don't know if you guys have other examples.
No, Guillaume, I love that example. I just wanted to reiterate that didn't start by them differentiating on product and trying to win, right? That started with them having that question of, hey, how can we add value? How can we partner? What are you struggling with, right? And again, there is a trend that we're seeing, but that's not going to happen until we actually see, traditional incentives for people in the field being pulled away. Again, there is a movement now where, teams are not incentivized by sales anymore. GMs for various countries around the world don't have a P&L target, right? But until we have those incentives taken away, I think it's still going to be hard to have those type of conversations. And unfortunately, we're going to have very few examples of that there, right? So that's my invitation for my peers on the call, the 200 plus that are here, right? Just please, look at that model and start asking your customers, like, how can you help? And I think that's how you move ecosystems.
Brilliant. I'm going to come to another poll. It's in front of you now. Where is the biggest opportunity for pharma to innovate and unlock new revenue streams? Cell and gene therapies, digital therapeutics and behavioral health, health ecosystem collaborations, and digital twins. And I'm going to come to Guillaume again and just ask, what opportunities are you seeing? Have you got any examples of what you've experienced out there on the market through some of your work?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's hard to say, what are the biggest opportunities. Obviously, novel products is where we begin as manufacturers. So cell and gene therapy, mRNA technology, precision medicine holds a ton of value, right? But also, those therapies, cell and gene therapy requires a completely different commercial model, right? So it's not sometimes, the treatment is one time, right? So we're used to, from a commercial setting, keeping patients on therapy for the longest time on meds. And, our commercial model is driven to support that patient journey. But the patient journey for cell and gene therapy is very different. Services become really important. So, we're working with some of the, Novartis, J&J, GSK, although GSK, is rethinking their portfolio for cell and gene therapy. But working with companies with cell and gene therapy, we're looking at what services can companies provide to patients as they go, when they get, first of all, getting diagnosis. So using AI ML models for who are the right patients, number one. Number two, so patient identification, patient recruitment. Once the patient is diagnosed, who's at high risk, and actually the right patient to receive that treatment, actually supporting their journey to, scheduling apheresis centers, transfusions, taking that sample and sending it to the manufacturing facility, keeping that chain of identity. All of that requires a set of services, a set of that you provide the patient, to the provider who's taking, who's actually caring for that patient. So a lot of digital capabilities we're enabling to be able to do that, and help pharmas think through sort of where in that patient journey is the right intervention. So that's like one area on cell and gene therapy. That I can actually go on for digital therapeutics. Digital therapeutics are more than like 35 DTX products that have been approved by FDA. A good example has been obviously, Paratherapeutics for substance, to use digital as a way to help patients with substance abuse, or treatment for substance abuse payers. A lot of the conversation had been around coverage and reimbursement models. Well, now, things are looking very bright on that front. One, towards the end of last year, I think in April or something, CMS actually has a billing code for DTX. So that's one thing. Second is a lot of the commercial payers. I know Highmark, I'm from Pittsburgh, so Highmark and from about 17 Blue Cross Blue Shield plans actually have coverage for DTX, right? So, I can go on, and I'll wait for others to join in, but there are examples, certainly in each of these categories, that provides pretty significant opportunity. And, from our perspective, you have to think of these ecosystems and not just these things siloed to create the maximum opportunity.
Gonna just quickly jump in there and share the results from those poll. So we've got cell and gene therapies at 23%, digital therapeutics and behavioral health at 38%, health ecosystem collaborations for 31%, digital twins 4%, and other at 3%. And there was a fair point from Tracy in the chat. The answers to the poll might be very different if the question focused on where the biggest opportunity is to impact patient outcomes. So I take your point there, Tracy, and one for us at Reuters Events to think about in the next time round. We've got just over 5 minutes left, and so I want us to finish on shaping the company. And so Zen and Davidek, I would love to hear from your thoughts on this one, because there seems to be a war on talent where pharma is trying to hire industry outsiders, tech and digital savvy talent with skills in human design thinking, data science, automation, not necessarily the old pathway for someone within a pharma company. Is this something you've experienced? Do you agree? What is your company or been your strategy for attracting new talent? Zen, I'll come to you first.
I'm going to champion for something maybe controversial. I think there is a bigger landscape shifting. The pharma started with primary care model, right? Chronic disease and reach and frequency. And now you see a lot of evolution, from Pfizer, from Novartis, from Roche. Going to much more specialty care model. high value medicine, and then, target a smaller patient population. If you capture this big land shift, a sort of a shifting dynamic, and then stay on strategy with any organization, please stay on strategy. Your leadership are gonna ask you first about investments on strategy, off strategy, and then making sure you capture near-term and long-term value, making sure you have some budget, not under the brand team, not under the product team, because you have to be at the decision-making table. Otherwise, I don't think very hard to measure if something non-core. With that in mind, creating value quickly, timing matters, right? So have long-term in mind, but do making sure, because we are operating on the quarterly earnings. I'm just giving some very hard facts. So making sure this is embedded in the organization, both near-term and long-term, and then you can really become an integral piece of the success. And that, in my mind, is very important for organization consideration. Yeah. David, go ahead. Yeah. Try to save 2 minutes for you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll keep it quick, but this is definitely deserves its own time as well. But in regards to the talent piece, right, I do think there's still, as an industry, we're struggling to find diversified talent, specifically in some of these spaces. And I know we're working very closely with the internal and external partners on just the discovery piece on they're out there, right? We just have to find them and look for them. But I think the key here is not only the external talent, but also really, I want us to focus internal talent. I think specifically in some of these spaces, there's a great opportunity we have as an industry to really elevate the people we have now, right? And with the access to information and everything out there, the willingness, which I'm starting to see, and just to want to jump in this space, right? Because if you think about it, we're transforming the commercial modelization into the future, right? Who doesn't want to be part of that? And that encompasses everything from the old school medical marketing, sales, access, everything. At some point in the next 5-10 years, you need to have some of these skill sets in those roles if you want to continue to move around. So the voice is, again, it is hard to find really good, diverse talent, but then internally, really, we're seeing a lot of people investing internally and seeing some really great results there.
Jane, I know you're doing some interesting things within your organization. What are your thoughts? It would be great to take your take on this.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things there. So obviously talent, like where we source talent that is not part of the company, is definitely a big source of, I think, of opportunity, honestly, because pharma is kind of near the back end of the innovations cycle. So there's nowhere to go but people who are maybe more innovative than us as we bring talent in. And we found that we've been bringing talent in from even places as far ahead of us as Amazon, and they're mission driven. That's what brings them to us. They're not necessarily there for the tech, but they are there for the fact that what they're doing is helping patients live better, longer lives. And that resonates with them maybe more than a website update or whatever they're doing at Amazon. So that's been really cool to see people cross over and learn healthcare. And we've developed good ways to kind of bring them up to speed on what this industry is. On the other hand, I think what we're trying to do in our sort of experiment here with data digital technology functions is, can we find those connector people who are both technical and have some skill in coding or whatever it is, but also have a business mindset and an orientation towards strategy? And they're few and far between, but we're making more of them. We're pulling people from either side into the middle. And I think what's neat is watching this team form all over the place in Takeda that has the ability to talk tech and to think about data and digital, and has an omni-channel hat that they can put on, but also has a really strong understanding, perhaps an MBA or something like that, that brings them the expertise that they can bring up Michael Porter comfortably as well. So I think that's kind of what we want to see. Maybe that's a bit of like that marketer of the future, or kind of a customer engagement model of the future, is people who are a little bit comfortable in both. And I'll just say our customers are in the same place, right? The clinician population tipped from being more digital native in about 2014 or so. So clinicians are already more digital native than they are not. And that, I think there's something, as I saw with IQVIA, like 1 in 3 clinicians will leave the practice in the next year or two because of just the mixture of people retiring and people leaving from kind of the burnout of COVID. So we have this really transformational shift in who we're talking to. And they tend to be obviously much more digital friendly and also more female. That's the other big shift. The doctor population is going to be more than 50% female over the next couple of years. So I think there's a lot of opportunity from a talent perspective to try to meet people where they are. I'm obviously an advocate for women in data and digital myself. But I think in general, there's just more of the diversity of thought and experience will bring a big asset for any team that's trying to do stuff in data and digital. So you're right, it's a whole topic, but I think it's helpful to think about it in that context of how do we meet our customers where they are.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jane. And Phil, I'll give you the last word on some advice to the audience for thinking about competitive advantage and gaining one as well.
Yeah, I think it's to where we ended up with what Jane, Zen, and Davidek talked about in 10 seconds to drive digital, a competitive advantage through novel products and digital. Out of all the things that we talked about, it's about cultural change for our industry. You have to really think of rewiring talent, incentives, and your digital and data ecosystems to be able to impact lives at speed and at scale. I'll end there.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vyom, Jane, David, Zen. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll send the recording out to you early next week. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.